Everybody, thanks for joining me after the conference semifinals. Three games over this weekend were very entertaining. And so I do have some thoughts about what I saw and how it pertains to the 49ers. But first off, well, if you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe. I think we're getting close to 10,000 subscribers. That's not too many for a lot of people who provide 49ers content. But for me, every hour I reach a new high, a new personal best. So I'm very excited about that. First off, you heard me talk a lot about Jeff Ulbrich since what, week 6 of the regular season, once the Jets fired Robert Saleh and started to think ahead to if the 49ers were to make a change at defensive coordinator. Well, they did. Nick Sorensen won't be back as a defensive coordinator. And the guy that I kind of thought made the most sense, the most logical person to fit that bill, Jeff Ulbrich, someone that Kyle Shanahan went after a year ago. Well, Jeff Ulbrich is the new defensive coordinator of the Atlanta Falcons. So on my last video, I talked about how the search for defensive coordinator for the Falcons and the 49ers have been completely different. Falcons interviewed numerous people. 49ers have not had a formal interview with anybody other than Robert Saleh and Deshae Townsend. And those interviews took place the day after the 49ers end of season press conference with John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan. So with Jeff Ulbrich out of the picture, and I do think that Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers have reached out to candidates. They just haven't set up anything formal. The easiest way to interpret that is that they're waiting for Robert Saleh to kind of figure out where the dust settles, what's happening with him. Robert Saleh has not been mentioned in any other defensive coordinator positions. Of course, there's only one head coach whose job has been filled at this point. That's Mike Vrabel. He's not going to be going to the Patriots, it doesn't appear. And so if Robert Saleh doesn't get a head coaching job with the Jaguars, with the Raiders, with the Cowboys, then it certainly appears as if Robert Saleh will be the defense coordinator for Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers. And I know a lot of people are saying, well, 49ers don't have a plan B. I can assure you they have a plan B, but probably they don't want to go down that road and do anything official as far as an interview until they know what's going on with Saleh. But obviously, the 49ers have thought ahead. In fact, or in the case that Saleh does not get, or he does get a head coaching opportunity with somebody else. Obviously, behind the scenes, the 49ers have their list of guys that they would go after, but it certainly appears to be obvious at this point that Robert Saleh is their main guy. Okay, if you've watched me, you know I'm not big into hot takes and riling up the fan base, but you know what? I'm going to make an exception today. I'm going to give you my hot take, and it's kind of consistent with what I've been saying for most of the season. The one thing that watching these games, it's dawned on me that, you know what, folks, the 49ers offensive line isn't that bad. I look at other teams around the league and I see how teams struggle to protect their quarterback, how some of these mobile quarterbacks are running around. And I would say that everybody's kind of saying the 49ers biggest need and where they have to address positions in the draft, offensive line and defensive line. I would say defensive line for sure. And then it never hurts to get playmakers, whether that's a defensive backfield, whether that's offensive players. That is where the 49ers' biggest need is. And just, I kind of look at where other teams have gone. Look at, for instance, the Detroit Lions are said to have, one of the best offensive lines in the game. Probably everybody out there watching agrees with that. But then look what happens that they get bounced from the playoffs. Jared Goff is sacked twice. He loses a fumble and he throws 3 interceptions. So what good did the offensive line do the Lions in that game? I look at the Chargers. They took Joe Alt, number 5 overall in the draft. What happens when they get bounced in a one and done? Justin Herbert gets intercepted 4 times. And on the season, Joe Alt might be a really good player. but he did give up 6 sacks as a rookie. Then, I look at the game on Sunday with the Eagles. Eagles, again, very good offensive line. However, Jalen Hurts gets sacked 7 times, including a safety against the Rams. Now, I know what you're saying. What about Saquon Barkley? He had a huge day running. Well, my point is that Saquon Barkley was great with the Giants. He's great with the Eagles. Derrick Henry was great with the Titans. He is great with the Ravens. Christian McCaffrey, before he was NFL Offensive Player of the Year for the 49ers, he was great with the Panthers with a thousand season. And then Josh Jacobs, he was great with the Raiders. He was great with the Packers. So, is that the offensive line doing that, or is it the playmakers? And when you talk about playmakers, I mean, look no further than the Kansas City Chiefs in the when you look at where they've addressed offensive line, the last 2 drafts, they took Kingsley Suamataia in the second round. No, first round, I think, right? Of the 2024 draft. They took him high. One of the first offensive linemen taken. He's in the starting lineup for a couple of weeks. He gets benched, never sees the light of day. Last year, 2023, in the first round, I guess it would be 2 years ago now since we're in 2025. But in 2023, they took an offensive lineman, Wanye Morris, in the third round of that draft. He's inactive now. In 2022, they didn't take an offensive lineman, period, in the first 3 rounds. Now, they did hit on a second rounder in 2021, Creed Humphrey, but no offensive lineman in the first 3 rounds of the drafts for the Kansas City Chiefs from 2015 until 2021. And the guy they took in the that round, Mitch Morse, he played 4 years for the Chiefs. Was a for starting center, good player, but he's kicked around the league, and he wasn't on any of the Chiefs' 3 Super Bowl winners. So I guess my point is, it seems to have worked for the Kansas City Chiefs of not drafting offensive linemen high in drafts. And, I look back, I know the game has changed a lot, but in Bill Walsh's time with the 49ers never took an offensive lineman in the first round. They did take Harris Barden, or I guess they did one time, Harris Barden, who ended up being a really good player, and the 49ers won a lot of Super Bowls. So, when I look at the 49ers and what they did against the Rams this season, and then you stack up what the Rams did in the postseason, harassing Sam Darnold, rolling up big sack numbers against the Vikings, big sack numbers against the Eagles. In week 3, Brock Purdy was sacked once, and he absolutely tore up the Rams. That was week 3. He had a 137 passer rating in that game. Week 15, yes, the Rams did get some pressure, a lot of pressure, and they kind of, obviously it was like 12-6 game. But in that game, Brock Purdy was sacked 3 times for minus 14 yards. That was a game with Jalen Moore starting at left tackle in place of Trent Williams. And in fact, in that game, the player who had the worst game or the roughest game for the 49ers in that game was Dominic Pooney, who generally played very, very well as a rookie third round draft pick. So what I'm saying is there are no absolutes, of course. If the 49ers at number 11 see a Trent Williams type of player or a great, great player there on the offensive line, yes, they can take him. But I would say that for the most part, it's okay not to draft an offensive lineman in the first or second round because you can get guys that you can develop later on. Case in point, Dominic Pooney. And the other thing is, when I'm watching the games over the weekend, how many times were offensive linemen talked about? Basically none, unless, it was a holding penalty, giving up a sack. And I realize that's the nature of the beast. But the guys who win games are the playmakers. And that's why I think with the 49ers, they had a decent offense this year. They still ranked highly. I was kind of surprised to find out watching the game on Sunday that the 49ers actually outscored the Rams this season. And the Rams, of course, are a team that is supposed to have this high-powered offense, and they do, but the 49ers still scored more points than the Rams. So anyway, I just think that you don't take offensive linemen early in the draft because that the only time you talk about him and these guys don't make a big difference in games on a continual basis. I'm sure there'll be a lot of people who will get angry and disagree with me on that, but that's just the way I feel. Okay, so watching the game on talking about the NFC, watching the game on Saturday, watching the game on Sunday, a couple things stand out. Talk about the window. Boy, the Detroit Lions, everything was set up well for them this season, obviously, except for the injuries. And you can look at it next year, they'll come back, they'll get healthy, they'll make another run at it. But, a year ago, we were talking about the window. Actually, a lot of people are talking about the window for the 49ers. I'm a believer that every year the window opens, every year the window closes. For the 49ers, it closed, about three-quarters of the way through the season, and they'll try to kind of recoup and get back out there next season. For the Lions, the window closed on a trick play. When you have an opportunity to go win a game, you have a good offense. I just don't understand why you put the ball in the hands of a wide receiver on a gimmick play, throws an interception. That's the end of their season. Things are changing for the Lions, no doubt about it. People around the league believe that both of their coordinators will end up getting head coaching jobs. So that puts the Lions in very much a state of question marks heading into the 2025 season. If Ben Johnson isn't running that offense, if Aaron Glenn isn't running that defense, what are the Lions going to look like? So the Lions were clearly the best team in the NFC this season. And I see next year as things being wide open with probably the Washington Commanders being the team that heads into next year as being the favorite just because of Jaden Daniels, and a big tip of the cap to some people with 49ers ties, obviously. Dan Quinn, many years ago, he started as an entry level coach with the 49ers and got to know him very well. It's great to see him doing really good things. Almost won a Super Bowl a few years back with the Falcons, and now leading the Commanders to a couple of victories in the postseason, including that big upset over the Detroit Lions. And of course, Adam Peters, former assistant general manager for the 49ers, probably on the short list or maybe the only list for NFL defensive or NFL executive of the year. Adam Peters doing a great job. And then the other team that got bounced from the playoffs, the LA Rams. We talked a lot about their defensive line, their depth, how good they are, and where they've sunk in a lot of draft capital into getting that defensive line up to speed with depth, with playmakers. And by the way, they really haven't done much with their offensive line. So, another. Well, here's the thing. Did I say this already? Every year, when I look at the teams that draft offensive linemen in the first round, when bad teams draft offensive linemen in the first round or high in a draft, guess what? They're still bad teams the next year and the year after that. So that's another point that I'd like to make. But when you look at the Rams, where are they going to be next year? Matthew Stafford will turn 37 in February, so there are obviously question marks there. But other than him, the Rams have a young team, and they should be a player next year. And now the 49ers have to figure some stuff out on their coaching staff with a defensive coordinator, a special teams coordinator, which everything is still kind of right there. I would assume, right now, Chris Tabor and Nick Sorensen are the top candidates for that. And then it's a matter of kind of retooling that roster, which I think starts with a new blood in at defensive line, especially defensive tackle. There will be some opportunities there throughout the draft. And then again, my suggestion, my recommendation, unless there's a player that they see as an absolute game changer, waiting until maybe the third or fourth round to address offensive line. So bring it. I know that a lot of people out there have opinions on that matter. So try to be nice to me because, I do have feelings. So don't get too personal. But yeah, go ahead. Tell me what you have to say in the comments section. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll be back on Monday probably, just to update on what's going on with this team.